Walked into my aunt's row home in Southwest Philadelphia on March 4th, 1994. She lived two doors away from me. I walked in, was sitting up in her living room and not even paying attention, watching World News Tonight when I heard the news that John Candy had passed away. And I turned around to my uncle and said to him, "I can't believe that John Candy is dead. This is horrible. I can't believe that John Candy died." And he looked at me and mockingly said, "Oh no, John Candy's dead. I can't believe it. What are we going to do?" But I was serious. This was the first celebrity death that had affected me. It was like someone in my family had passed away. It was someone I had grown up with. It was somebody I had watched on TV since I could remember turning a television on. It was somebody who I had seen in Splash in a South Philly movie theater with my mom and dad and my brother. This was really affecting me, and my uncle was making light of it, which, looking back now, I'm sure John Candy probably would have approved of.
It's something that you can't ask an actor to do. Either up on the screens, people are instinctively rooting for somebody or they're not rooting for somebody. And John is just somebody that people rooted for.
Hello, and welcome to this special impromptu episode of Pop Culture Basement. I am your host, Mike Jamison, and with me tonight is podcaster, proud Canadian, and most importantly, very, very patient person, Melissa Nicholson. Melissa, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing very well.
So, just behind the scenes, I want to thank Melissa first off, before we even start the episode, for abiding my madness. Because, just to give a little background, this is Saturday, October 11th. On Friday, October 10th, the John Candy documentary, I Like Me, debuted. And I was, of course, sitting in my basement on a Friday evening, scrolling through Twitter, scrolling through Facebook, not doing anything productive, and saw that Melissa was watching this documentary. I knew it was coming out. I had forgotten that it was debuting on October 10th. So I was very excited. I knew it was sorted now. I knew what I was watching for that night. And well, I mean, not to bury the lead, I was basically a 50-year-old blubbering and crying in my basement after watching the documentary, and we'll get to that. But cut to today, which is Saturday, October 11th. My son is upstairs playing video games and talking to his girlfriend. My wife is watching a Disney movie in our sunroom, and my daughter is out on a play date with one of her myriad of friends. I don't even know who it is. She has so many friends, I can't keep track of them. So I decided to message Melissa and ask her if she wanted to jump on and do a podcast about the John Candy documentary. And instead of ignoring me like the crazy person that I am and that she probably should have, she actually said yes. And I'm cutting into her pizza eating time right now because she was most likely getting ready to eat dinner until some psychopath messaged her and asked her if she wanted to jump onto a podcast. So, Melissa, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Uh, and
You're
this isn't
hardly a
even
psychopath.
no, I am. It's okay. This isn't
It's
even
not
the
like you
episode.
were right outside my window going, "Want a
Well,
podcast?"
that was my next. If you hadn't answered me, I was gonna fly out and see what you were doing. I probably would have delivered the pizza actually and said, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast really fast about the John Candy documentary?" um, but before this isn't even this isn't even the podcast that you and I are supposed to be doing first because we have a long gestating Doctor Who podcast that will, yes, it will eventually come out.
And it'll be about 3 hours long.
I thought maybe 5, but yes, 3 to 5 hours
Okay,
long.
5. Yeah.
I'm putting aside a whole weekend for that one. So that is coming soon. But I have done after Val Kilmer passed away, I did a podcast with my good friend Leanne Bellasissa, and we did a Val Kilmer retrospective. But that was about a week or two after he passed away. I didn't just message her out of the blue at 3 o'clock in the morning one Tuesday morning and say, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" So again, I appreciate you abiding my madness. But since this is your first time on, even though it's not the episode that we thought was going to be your first time on, I always ask first time guests about how they consumed pop culture in their childhood. I just find it interesting because especially because you are so much younger than I am, it's such a different generation. What was it like for you growing up? Did you have a special place that you would go to watch movies, watch TV, read?
Well, I wasn't lucky enough to have a basement. Much like, a lot of people, they have to go down to the basement with the TV and everything set up. And for me, it was mostly living room because, like, um, in the one house that we lived in, it didn't have a finished basement, so we didn't really have a living space down there. So it was mostly just main floor and our living room, and that's where I would watch most of my movies, which were mostly recorded off of CBC and recorded onto tape, and not the best quality, but um, or it was watched on CBC because they would usually play like on I guess like on weekends, like CBC movies, and it was usually during the summertime, and so I caught quite a few movies through that, and then it was you know renting movies and also borrowing from the library, and I would watch all those basically in my living room. Um, for reading and things like that, it was usually in my bedroom. Is where it would be because I kept most of my books and things in my bedroom. I had a like bookshelf and everything. Um, so that's where I usually consumed that stuff. But yeah, it was just regular old living room. Other than um, for other things like because we didn't have cable for a really long time, um, we would like go over to my grandma's house and where they had cable TV. So that's where I first watched MASH. That's where I watched uh, different like Last of the Summer Wine and Mythbusters and how it's made on Discovery Channel, and that's where I watched these things. And I always looked forward to going to my grandma's house and getting to watch those shows and hang out with her and my grandpa and all that. And so yeah, that's where I consumed most of my uh, pop culture stuff.
Yeah, growing up, I didn't get cable until I was in, I believe, a freshman in high school.
Oh,
And I always tell the story about the local Philadelphia cable channel, Prism, which was basically HBO, but with Philadelphia sports teams. We got it for hockey. We wanted to watch. My aunt and uncle and my dad were huge Flyers fans, so we lived two doors away. My aunt had Prism, so we would go over there to watch hockey games, but we'd also go over there to watch movies. So it was almost the same. I was very lucky that I grew up two doors away from my grandparents and my aunt and uncle and my cousins because it was like having two other sets of parents and another set of brothers and a sister. So, and my wife grew up much like the story you just told. She grew up. She didn't have cable. Her parents did. They've never had cable where they live, but, she didn't have cable at all. Her grandmother, who lived 5, 10 minutes away, had cable, so whenever she always looked forward going over her grandmother's house because she would get to watch Nickelodeon, she would get to watch all of these shows and all these channels she never got to watch at home, so, yeah, I always find it interesting just how different it is for people consuming this kind of stuff and where they would go, the certain places they would go, and just how they would take that all in. But talking about Prism, Prism was one of the main ways that I got to see movies that had John Candy in them. I talked about Splash in the opening. I think that's probably the first movie I saw him in a movie theater. But before then, I had definitely seen him in the Blues Brothers that I most likely saw on Prism, and 1941 that would play on Prism over and over and over again, and then saw him in Splash when I saw him in the movies, and then after that, as a child of the '80s, I was born in 1974, so grew up in the '80s. John Candy was everywhere. And again, much like I said in the opening, when he died, it was the first celebrity death that really did affect me, that made me feel sad. And this was before, I would say, this is right before Kurt Cobain died. So for my generation, obviously, when that happened, that's something I remembered. For people in the 60s, it's, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. For me, it's Kurt Cobain, but this was before Kurt Cobain. And even Kurt Cobain, yeah, I was a fan of Nirvana, and that was at that time a big music fan, and that, voice of a generation. So I felt a certain way about it, but it didn't hit me like John Candy, a person I never met and had only seen through my television or a movie screen, but it felt like someone in my family had passed away. And you had mentioned something, and I thought it was really interesting. And this is really one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. You're of a totally different generation, and like you said, I think it was on a Facebook post that you had put up.
Yeah.
This is a person who I think he was gone. Did you say he was gone before you were
Yeah.
even born? So this
Yeah.
is
Because
somebody
I
who
was I was born in '92.
okay, so he died when you were 2 years old. So
Yeah.
basically, I mean, you don't remember when you're 2, you didn't know who he
No.
was. So for most of your adult life, he's been gone, but it's somebody who has affected your life in a certain way. And watching this documentary, when you watch celebrity documentaries, you're either watching them for one, you know that this person has a kind of infamous reputation and you want the dirt behind that.
Mm.
Or maybe it's somebody who is supposed to be perfect and you want to find out the bad things about them. It's the nature of celebrity, athletes, movie stars. We put them up on pedestals and you kind of forget that they're human beings. Nobody, it's the politicians. Nobody is perfect. There's nobody who is perfect. You and I are not perfect. Unfortunately, I wish my wife will come downstairs right now and tell you I am not perfect. But after watching this documentary, it seems like you can get pretty much close to being a perfect human being. And if you can, it's most likely John Candy. And I think he affected you as somebody who was only born 2 years before he passed away. He affected me as somebody who grew up watching him during my formative years, and he affected all of the famous and brilliant comedians and actors who were around him. As I've been looking over social media the past 12 to 15 hours after watching the documentary and seeing other people who have watched it, it's all the same. It's everyone saying, "Bring your tissues because you're gonna cry." And it's true, and I'm just trying to figure out why now, why this is affecting all of us now. And, I have you on, so go ahead, tell me, why is this affecting all of us? No, I mean, so you were saying, so you were 2 when he passed away, but then how were you introduced to John Candy?
I was introduced to him. I think it was through watching Spaceballs. I think that was the first time I had seen him in a movie. When I got getting introduced to Mel Brooks movies, and because that was something my parents said, like you got to watch these movies, which was good on them because I love his movies now.
That's good
Um,
parenting right there.
yeah. But yeah, that was the first one that I had seen John Candy in, and you gotta love him. Like he was just so fun and funny, and it always from that movie anyway, like quotable, you know. And he even then like just seemed like just genuine, like just had that genuineness about him, that groundedness, that he wasn't, yes, he was playing another character, but there was still that genuine level about him. And then it was the Blues Brothers after
Okay.
that. Yeah. And, for the little bit of time that he is in that one, Orange
Well,
Whip,
yeah,
Orange Whip.
exactly. He's remembered. He's not in a movie that's a comedy classic,
Yeah.
and he doesn't have a lot of screen time, but what
You
he does
remember
with
him.
it, yeah, what he does with it is what's important, and he's remembered. I didn't want to really do a review of the documentary itself. I just wanted to kind of use the documentary as kind of a jumping point, just to talk about what John Candy could mean to people of two different generations. But for me, one of the really fun parts of watching documentary, I'm a comedy nerd, and that time period of the early 70s, of, the gestation of Saturday Night Live and the Second City, is like manna from heaven. So to see all of the Second City, and Saturday Night Live people on there,
Oh,
being interviewed and
throws up a little
talking
bit.
about, John Candy, and talking about all of them coming up, and the formation of the comedy that basically shaped what comedy was gonna be for the next 40 years, is so interesting to me. And it's almost a juxtaposition also, but, of somebody like John Belushi, who is Belushi and Candy are kind of in that same mold where they're the bigger guys, and John Candy is the one that you feel like is the one you could kind of hug, and is the fun uncle, and John Belushi is on the other side, who is the one who is dangerous, and maybe is the uncle that you see maybe at one birthday party every couple of years. When he remembers to show up, he'll come driving in on his Harley Davidson, and, it's both sides of the coin, but you understand why they were both groundbreaking in the way they were, but they are totally different. It would seem anyway. I mean, they come at it totally differently. Just the roles they play, and it's weird to think of them both coexisting at that same time and being friends. I mean, they talk about that they interacted. I mean, John Candy, uh, they tried to get him at various different points in those early years to be on to be on Saturday Night Live as an early cast member. So it's a kind of cool what if to think if he ever did join. Um, did you watch SCTV at all?
I I've seen maybe a couple episodes of SCTV, but it wasn't something that I really like watched a lot of. But when the few things that I have watched of it, it's very funny.
For me, SCTV was weird because it was at the time, again, being of a totally different generation than you are. It was a time where I could turn on PBS on a random Saturday afternoon or a random Sunday night because I didn't want to go to bed because I didn't want to go to school the next day. And you could find episodes of Blackadder. I didn't know it was Blackadder at the time. You could find episodes of Faulty Towers. And they would sometimes have episodes of SCTV. So it was these comedians who, by that time, I kind of knew because they were reruns, they weren't live, but it was Martin Short would be on there, John Candy, Rick Moranis, Dave Thomas. So I knew these people from various TV shows and various movies that I had seen, and my 10, 11, 12-year-old adult brain is like, what is this TV show that these guys are on, and why is it so funny? Then there were the early episodes with Harold Ramis, who I knew from Ghostbusters, and I'm thinking, why is Egon on this comedy show? I don't understand this. And being somebody who grew up with Saturday Night Live, I loved Saturday Night Live growing up. I watched it from an early age. I can remember as an 8-year-old watching the Eddie Murphy cast of Saturday Night Live. So I was already into the sketch comedy, and like I said, comedy nerd who was into all that kind of stuff. Watching this, I would think to myself, what is this? I need to know what this is. I need to see more of this. And it was just it was so amazing to find this because it was it was so much different than some of the comedies I was seeing John Candy in, because it was some of that later John Hughes stuff
Hmm.
where he was still very funny, but it was a little bit more family oriented. And we're talking about the Blues Brothers earlier in his career. Not that it was super edgy, because that's again bringing up that juxtaposition between him and John Belushi. I think John Candy, that was some of his brilliance, was that he could be subversive, but he put it out there with a smile, and he was just cuddly enough that he was able to get that subversiveness through to the mainstream with some people it totally going over their heads, and for other people it just, it's like making the medicine going down easy.
Yeah, he really like he had that sort of subtlety about him where it's like he'll come up with like that, say something that's, people might get but might not. So it's that subtle humor that if you're paying attention, it's like, huh, I know, I know what you just said, but he's got that like cheeky grin, you know.
I
Yeah,
will say 10 minutes in, hearing Dan Aykroyd read aloud the eulogy that he gave to him, I almost lost it there, and I do know some friends of mine all said, "Okay, I can't, after this, I need to wait a little bit because I know what I'm in for. I just need to regroup and gird myself and be ready to watch the rest of this." Um,
yeah,
it's just to see Dan Aykroyd, to see Bill Murray, who is famously Bill Murray is not exactly Mr. Warm and Cuddly. So
no,
to see him talking about calling him Candy and to talk about their early years and seeing some of the footage that they have of younger Bill Murray working with him at Second City, and to see, I mean, there's always been those famous pictures of John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Catherine O'Hara, Martin Short. Uh, I think it's the one where they're kind of like in the trunk of a car. I mean, just to know
yeah,
like all of these giants who came out, and especially because it came out of Godspell in Toronto, that they were performing Godspell when Eugene Levy was there. This is where all of these people met and were performing Gilda Radner. And all of them, I think you can tell in documentaries sometimes, you can tell if people are faking it. If they need to say something nice about the person or they need to talk around how that person really is. You can see
yeah,
how John Candy affected all, I mean, Steve Martin, who's famously not, I don't think of Steve Martin as a emotional type of guy. He's very cerebral type of person,
yeah,
especially in his later years. I mean, if you look at his look at him in the 70s, he was not that way, but now he
no,
is. And he
yeah,
even says it in the documentary that during trains, planes, and automobiles, he was developing into a more of a not serious actor, but he was calming down and changing his persona a little bit. But you can see the way that John Candy affected all of his co-stars. And that's what makes it so interesting to watch this documentary and to see the effect that he had on I like that Tom Hanks says it was, Splash was his first big movie, and he's working with John Candy, who he already knew and is in awe of already, and he's realizing that John Candy is basically saying to him, "Hey, you know, let's work on this together." He's giving him space to improvise with him instead of just saying, "Well, I need to get the big laugh. I need to be the one who is the funny one in this." And you could tell that Tom Hanks was appreciative of that and most likely learned from that because and the person Tom Hanks is anyway, who God forbid when they do the documentary on him years from now when he passes away, it will probably be a Kleenex, a double box Kleenex
yeah,
night.
yeah,
But, stories like that where he was so giving to people, and you always wanna find that out, I think, with I'm not gonna say that John Candy is my hero, but he's somebody who I admire. So when you watch these documentaries, you don't wanna find out, "Oh, never mind, he was a scumbag." Everything you believed
yeah,
about him was wrong.
yeah. He was, not really the greatest person that you thought he was, or whatever. But and that's what I really liked about that documentary was that, like you had mentioned that some people, they have to kind of fake being nice and just, beat around, what they might think of that person that they're talking about. Whereas this one just seemed like really everybody was vulnerable in those interviews. Like they were, emotional in them because they had such, you know, an admiration and a respect for John Candy and what he did, and then his influence on them, and their growth, and like Tom Hanks, and realizing, oh, like John Candy's improving, he's doing the yes and thing, like he's encouraging you to like, and I was like, oh, kind of like his light bulb moment, and I was like, okay, we can have this back and forth and, change up thing a little, like our interaction a little bit as characters. And so that influence there of, you know, kind of step out of your comfort zone a little bit. He really, I think, encouraged that. And yeah, it was really nice to see that genuineness from everybody when they were talking about him.
I mean, they said at the end when I think I'm sorry, Martin Short, I believe, told the story that when they had, the pallbearers had put his casket into the car and they were driving to go to the cemetery, that they had closed down the
Yeah,
highway, and it had only happened twice, I think, for the president and for the Pope.
Pope. Yeah,
And they had was it in Toronto, I believe, they had closed down the highway so that they could drive him to the cemetery, and they had military personnel on the side of the road saluting the car
hmm,
going by. I mean, he truly seemed like a person that every person who met him, and there's stories that he would take the time to sit there and talk to people, to Macaulay Culkin, the stories that
hmm,
Macaulay Culkin told, and they show footage of Macaulay Culkin auditioning for Uncle Buck as an 8-year-old with
yeah,
John Candy, and Macaulay Culkin saying that he felt safe with John Candy, that John Candy, he did, again, working with children. And Macaulay Culkin even says, now, as somebody in my 40s, I understand it's hard to work with child actors. So he said he would understand if somebody, John Candy was already an established star, had the attitude of, oh, I need to work with kids. And he was there protecting Macaulay Culkin, one, as an actor to an actor, and two, he realized what Macaulay Culkin was going through, starting to get bigger. It was before Home Alone, but Macaulay Culkin was starting to establish himself, and he said he felt safe with John Candy. John Candy treated him no differently than anyone else and was actually with him and helping him on the set. And that's what you want to hear when when you
yeah.
when you when you look to somebody like this.
And even him like checking on Macaulay, like how his like sort of um outside life was going. And are you okay? Like how's it, are things good? Or like he genuinely cared, you know. He wanted,
Yeah,
make sure that he was okay.
yeah, and I think
So,
Macaulay Culkin had said, well, he was young then. He said in the back of his head, he just thought, okay, well, I'm going to see him again. I'll see him again, and I'll be able to check in with him. And
yeah.
that's not how it happens, and that goes into his kids. I mean, there's really great interviews with his children who have, I mean, you don't think about it really, but who have grown up most of their lives without a father, but are experiencing him through the work that he did, through the movies that he did, and through other people telling about their father affecting their lives. Like we're doing this podcast now, people who've never met him talking about, oh, how much we love this person and how much we're crying hearing about people talking about him. So it's like it's stuff you don't even think of, that his kids, and I mean, his son talks about having to go through therapy and having to work through, and he says, and this is another point with John Candy, is that, for most of his career, for almost all of his career, he had to fight against that Hollywood stereotype. He was always a bigger guy. So he was, they had him put into a certain type. And you watch these interviews from the 70s and 80s, you could tell it's such a different time because most of the questions are leading off with, oh, you're so big, you're so fat.
Yeah.
Oh, you're an attractive guy, but you're so big. And you realize Dave Thomas tells the story of them at a party and they leave, and John Candy had so much to drink, so Dave Thomas was driving, and in the passenger seat, Candy just says to him, "You don't know what it's like inside my head." And Dave Thomas said to him back, "Well, no, but I guess I'm going to find out." But he says to him, he said, "You don't know what it's like having to deal with this and having to deal with those questions." And he had issues of self-image. He had it, and he dealt with that with, and he knew it. He dealt with it with drinking and with eating and with smoking. And he knew that his father had died at 35 of a massive heart attack, and he knew that it was always something in the back of his head that, okay, I don't know if I'm going to, there's so many actors, musicians who say, I never thought I was going to make it to 35. I never thought I was going to make it to 40. He always lived with that in the back of his head. And it's hard to think of these famous people who you see on your television screen all the time as people who are insecure, who are just
Yeah.
like we are and don't think they're good enough and worry that, okay, I'm out here making millions of dollars, but I also never get to see my kids because I'm doing all this. And that just makes you feel closer to an actor like this, to see that he was so vulnerable and for somebody who brought so much happiness to people and was so good to other people, just couldn't be good to himself, it seems like.
Yeah, he really, like, he really put himself, like, kind of put himself to the side, and then placed all the, the wanting to help others in front of that. And maybe it was like a coping mechanism for him, like, okay, I'm gonna do good for people, I'm gonna help people, I'm gonna, do all these things, and, you know, forget the things that are going on in my head, or the pressures and the doubts and the things that are, the dark things, and just put the brightness out there, and I think that's ultimately, I think, what sadly I think ended things. That's all that pressure of, you know the pressure of how he looks, the pressure of, doing what he does, because you're always in that spotlight, and how fast he became that star, right? Like, he just really kind of burst out, and he was doing this, that, and the other thing, and he just kind of he kept going with it and was always doing something, and then finally when he gets to stop, oh, you know, but yeah, and the fact that it always hurt him that, he was off away, but he really wanted to be with his children. He really wanted to spend time with them.
Yeah, he
And,
tells the
he did,
story. No, I'm sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
And he did, make sure of that, I think. But yeah.
Now, he tells the story of being at a party with a bunch of people, with a bunch of like the Second City people and Saturday Night Live people, and they said to him, "Oh, Steven Spielberg's here. He wants you to be in his new movie." And he said, "Oh, well, everybody was drinking, so I just blew it off." And they said, "No, no, no, he's here. Come and meet him." So he went, and it was Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg said to him, "Yeah, I want you to be in my new movie." And he even says to Spielberg, "I know everybody's been having a good time tonight. Everybody's drinking. They've had a lot to drink. Thanks." And Spielberg's like, "No, I really want you to be in my movie," which turned into 1941, which famously did not do that well. But it's funny to think that he did two movies with John Belushi. I mean, it wasn't him and John Belushi, but with John Belushi, because like I brought up before, I mean, those are the two, I think, polar sides of that type of character that, I think that they were both kind of pigeonholed in, because John Belushi felt the same thing before he died. He was trying to move on to different type of roles. He started it with Neighbors, where he kind of played the opposite of the crazy kind of role that he usually plays. I mean, he was with Dan Aykroyd again, but Dan Aykroyd took on the crazier role and he took on more of the straight man. And I think that was something that John Candy, you saw, fought against later in his career. He did work in JFK, which he was really good in, actually. He was very good in JFK. And he did a little bit more. I can't think of the name of the movie off the top of my head, but it's with Ali Sheedy, and it's more of a romantic type of comedy. And I think he wanted to play those types of roles, and he was very cognizant that that's not what Hollywood wanted him to do. He says in the documentary again, agents telling him, "No, no, 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 don't," because he had trainers. He would try to drop weight, and agents would say to him, "No, no, no, this is what is expected of you. You're supposed to be the funny big guy. You're not supposed to be the romantic lead. So don't lose weight." You're actively having people tell you, "No, no, no, don't get healthy because that's going to affect your career in a negative way." And in you imagine just in your head the two things battling against each other, where you want to have a healthy self-image, But then you also have people saying, well, you're not going to be successful if you do this.
Yeah.
And I think you're already, as you can see with most actors and musicians and artists, they're already very, very insecure to begin with. And it was all hidden behind that smiling face that we always saw.
Yeah.
So it was very it was in it, I liked getting to see that side of him explored during the documentary. Now, one of the things that did take him away, we talked about he and in all accounts, his kids loved him. He was a very good father. He was a good husband. Somebody says that in the documentary that they're married. He and his wife got married, stayed married. Is one of the strongest marriages out of to come out of that group of people and that time with all that craziness that's going on with not only the working but the drugs that were going on, the drinking. This is the 70s and 80s. Um, but one of the things that he was known for and also was proud of, and this I know this is going to sound corny, but he was a proud Canadian. And I want to ask you, as someone who is Canadian, is he we know John Candy, and he's still somebody who people know who he is and as a Hollywood star, but is he looked upon in Canada? Is he remembered and looked upon as somebody with reverence even
Yes.
now? Even now?
Yeah. Definitely. A lot of Canadian actors and people in the that we very much look up to them. Like we, hold them in reverence and respect, and definitely for John Candy. He would definitely be somebody that, we're proud to, that he was that he's Canadian, yeah, we're very proud of that, and we're very, yeah,
I was gonna compare it to, like, here in the States, like, if you're from Philadelphia or you're from Pennsylvania and you make it big, we're always gonna be, as a Philadelphian or somebody from Pennsylvania, you're gonna say, "Okay, that's one of our guys. Bradley
yeah,
Cooper, he's from Philadelphia. Hey, hey, we're gonna get him. He's gonna do things for the sports teams," and we're gonna always say, like, "Okay, Bradley Cooper's from Philadelphia. That's right. Alright, cool."
hmm
So, somebody like in John Candy's stature, I mean, that was in the documentary, they make a point to that they called him Johnny Toronto because that
yeah,
was that kind of that kind of where everybody he knew always knew a guy. He was a guy who knew a guy, and he was one of those
yep,
guys. And I think all of us know those people who he's the guy who knows the people at the club who can get you in because he knows them. He's the guy who can call up the one mechanic who can come work on your car cheaper because he knows the guy to call. He was
yeah,
just that in a bigger way. But he was one of those guys, it's like, with Cheers, everybody knew who he was. And even before he was famous, and then after he was famous, I think people still felt they didn't feel that he was so big that he wasn't approachable and that he wasn't somebody who he was like everybody's uncle. That
yeah,
he was somebody who, if you need to call him to come pick you up late at night because you had too many drinks, he seems like somebody that he was somebody who would be the one you would call, although he'd probably be the one who was at the bar with you drinking.
yeah,
If you listen to Catherine O'Hare's eulogy at the end, one of the eulogies, which I think got to me also at the end, but she said, he'll either be buying all the drinks for you and will also be sitting next to you, closing down the bar also. So yeah,
yeah,
he was just somebody who he seemed like he was so approachable and just so easy to get along with. But to bring it back, you're saying like he's that if you're Canadian, you're very proud. It's Ryan Reynolds who executive produced the documentary, so he has been talking this up and making the rounds. So I'm sure that growing up, John Candy was somebody that he
yeah,
looked up to. I don't think you could compare their comedy styles, but I'm sure that
no,
he is somebody that grew up watching John Candy.
oh yeah, definitely. I think a lot of us did, and just loved, and then especially like how you know he was involved with the Argonauts and with the sports teams, and so I think that made him even a little bit more, and the fact that he wasn't like when he was owner of the Argonauts, he wasn't the guy who was up with everybody else. He was down on the field. He was there. Like, in there like a dirty shirt. Like he. So I think like that grounded him even more. Like he's just that guy who's gonna be there and not, you know, be up in some, above everybody and look down upon them. Like no, he's gonna be there, and yeah, he would be that the uncle that you call if you were, had one too many, and he'd come and get you. You know, yeah, he just he had that such, like I kind of said before, like that genuine grounded energy, and just he didn't, look like any other actor. Like he wasn't, fit and whatever. Like he looked just normal, whatever normal looks like. But you
Sure.
know, just that he had that normalcy about him, and I think that's what connected him to a lot of people. And the fact that he was just a good actor and he did a lot of, you know, great roles that you remember, even if it wasn't the longest part of, like, he wasn't the lead actor in the film, but you remembered him anyway. Even if he was sitting off in a corner somewhere, you'd remember him. You know?
Yeah, I think we could all see ourselves in him because of that everyman quality. And those are the kind of actors that stay with people. Because yeah, I can watch a movie with Brad Pitt and say Brad Pitt is cool and I really enjoyed him in that movie, but hey, listen, I know I'm not Brad Pitt. But
Hmm.
I can watch a movie with John Candy and say, okay, I'm that guy. I'm the dad who doesn't always do the right thing and I might be a little goofy and I might not get everything right, but at the end of the day, I love my kids and I love my wife and I'm just trying to do my best for them. And you could see yourself in that role or even in goofier roles. Like I grew up watching one of my favorite movies to watch when we finally did get cable and we had HBO. Who's Harry Crumb would be on all the time. Is Who's Harry Crumb a good movie? Hell no, it's not. It's a low rent Fletch, but you know what? John Candy is hilarious in it. And it's something I would watch over and over and over again. Also because I didn't have 17 streaming channels that I had 8 million choices. So this was a time where you took what you got. So you turn it on in the middle of the day. Who's Harry Crumb's on? Okay, I'm watching it. Am I watching The Great Outdoors? Sure, why not? The Great Outdoors is on. I'm watching The Great Outdoors, and I can see myself in now. I always talk about on this podcast where my perceptions have changed whenever I watch something for the podcast now because it's something like The Great Outdoors that I watched as a 13-year-old and thought was hilarious. And now I watch it as dad and say, and I told my son this today because there is the part of the documentary where they show a scene from the movie and he's talking to his teenage son and he hugs him. And the son says, "Oh, Dad." And John Candy says to him, "Oh, what? We're not allowed to hug anymore?" He says, "Come here, give me a hug. I love you." And I said to my son, I was like, now, because I hugged him today, and my son doesn't care, but I said to him, I was telling him about the documentary, and I said, now I could see myself. I didn't think about this 30, 35 years ago, but now I get it. I understand having a son who might be like, "Dad, don't embarrass me. I'm trying to talk to my girlfriend. Please, come on now."
Yeah, you're
But
you're
that,
never too old for a hug.
but these, these, he will always be an actor that I will think of and smile. And like you said, it could be the smallest of roles, it could be the biggest of roles, but it will always be something that is memorable and that will mean something to you. I mean, who doesn't? You think about National Lampoon Vacation, and yeah, you're
Yeah.
going to think about some of the funnier parts, but one of the main
Loose
parts,
outside should have told you.
and they bring it up during the documentary that they screened Harold Ramis, who directed the movies. They were screen testing the movie. The original ending wasn't working. So what does he
Yeah,
do? Calls up John Candy and says, "All right, we need a new ending. I need you to come in and work for a couple of days on this." And that, so it's like calling in the guy, and I think they say it in the documentary also. It's like calling in the closer from the bullpen. All right, we need somebody to close this out. Call Candy up. He's got this. And then
yeah,
he can come in and just do it. Or, of course, the famous story, and this is the more of the legend of John Candy, is in Splash, the famous scene where he's playing racquetball with with Tom Hanks, and they filmed that the night before he John Candy closed the bar down with Jack Nicholson. So
Yeah.
he was going on maybe an hour sleep and filmed a scene that's still a comedy classic and still remembered. And they said, if Jack Nicholson's asking you to close the bar down with him, you're not going to refuse.
No.
So,
Yeah,
and
and then he
Tom Hanks was amazed that he was and it's the famous scene where he hits himself in the head with the racquetball, and he said he was focusing his energy or lack of energy into the scene, but it's the scene you remember from that movie.
yeah. How long have we been playing? Oh, 5 minutes. Oh, you want a beer?
You want a beer? Smoking a cigarette. And he was one of those, and it's one of the better attributes to have as especially a comedic actor. He didn't want to or care about looking cool. And in not wanting to or not caring about looking cool, made himself all that much cooler because he was all that much funnier. And to stand out, I mean, there's so many titans that came out of that era, and most of them are represented here with Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, John Belushi, and he stands out still after all of these years not being here. And you sometimes have to tell yourself, "Oh, that's right, he's not around anymore." Because he does feel like he's still so beloved that I feel like, I mean, that he
You
isn't
you
here, but
know he's gone, but it feels like he's still around
yeah, he's
because of
gone, but
just
he's never truly gone.
yeah. Because you still have, all the movies and everything, and you can still go and watch them and remember them, and like always have fun with them, and yeah, that he's really not been, forgotten, and I don't think he ever will be, and I think he'll always be that beloved actor.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, I wanted to thank you again for coming up. When I say short notice, I mean this is really short notice. This is folks, I mean behind the curtain, this is like 10 minutes.
Oh
10
yeah,
minutes short notice out of nowhere. But,
more than happy to come on and chat about the
when a 50 year
documentary
old
and
man when a 50-year-old man is blubbering and
oh,
ugly crying in his basement watching a documentary and knows that other people are and knows that
yep.
other people want to talk about it, I just needed to talk to you and to get our thoughts
You
out.
know,
And
I've watched so many, documentaries about different things and about, different shows, and this is the probably the first one that I actually ugly cried through most of the movie, most of it. Like the beginning and then the end was just like I need all the tissues now.
well, I will say when it was done, much with Amazon, it's done, and you go back to the main screen and it has, well, if you like this, you'll like this, and it had all the John Candy movies under it.
Yeah.
So my after I wiped my nose and and fixed my makeup on my eyes after I was done crying, I said to myself, "Well, I guess I know what I'll be watching for the next couple weeks." Because after watching it, I was like, "Okay, I need to deep dive back into some of the John Candy movies that I haven't watched in a long time, like Summer Resort and even um, Blues Brothers. I haven't watched in a year, so that's way far too long. I gotta put the Blues
Yeah.
Brothers in there
I was
again.
thinking I was gonna wanting to watch The Great Outdoors again.
I
It's like
haven't
I
watched
hadn't
that in a
seen that
while.
one in a long time, so it's like, oh, I gotta watch that one.
Yeah, I got a
It
Great
just,
Outdoors. I'm definitely due for a rewatch on the Great Outdoors. Maybe I'll
yeah.
go look on Amazon and see how much SCTV the complete collection is too. Who knows? See, Amazon, this is what you do. You make like a really good documentary. This is why Jeff Bezos and Amazon are evil, because you make a great documentary like this that makes me cry and have to bother Melissa on the nights that
And
she just wants to sit down, eat pizza, and watch movies. And now I'm gonna go buy and now I'm gonna go buy like the complete SCTV. See?
oh yeah,
Damn
you
you,
start looking stuff
Amazon.
up and find something for like $5. It's like, ooh, I'm gonna buy that. Ooh, a
There
complete
is
collection? Buy.
I will say a year ago on Amazon Kindle, there is a book called Searching for Candy that I found for 99 cents, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna buy this." It's just about a biography of John Candy, and it's a really quick read. It covered a lot of the same ground that the documentary did. So if people out there do wanna it's a really fast read. I don't know if it's still 99 cents like when I found it, but it was on Kindle. It's called Searching for Candy. But again, Melissa, thank you for indulging me in my madness. Do you wanna give out any, where people can find you on social media if you want to be found?
Uh, Mostly I'm on Instagram, and I'm not on any of the other ones like X or Blue Sky or whatever other ones. I don't have a presence on there, so yeah, basically just just
You're
the
s
one for now.
you're smart.
Yeah,
You'll stay a lot saner over the long
yeah.
run if
Like,
you stay.
don't get me wrong, I was on, Threads and Blue Sky and all that, and then I just decided, no, I'm just gonna.
No, it's your mental health is a lot better than mine, believe me, you're smart. As for me, you can find, Pop Culture Basement on unfortunately, you can find me on social media. You can find me on, Twitter because I don't call it the other fake thing that it's called now, at Pop Culture Basement, or you can just find me under This Lightsaber Kills Fascists. I'm on Blue Sky under the same 2 monikers, Pop Culture Basement or This Lightsaber Kills Fascists, and on Facebook as Pop Culture Basement if you want to follow along with my pop culture musings and maybe sometimes pictures of my kids because it's Facebook. I mean, why not? I'm old, so that's what I do. um, but uh, until then, Melissa, again, thank you so much, and we will be back with a 17-hour Doctor Who episode, timey-wimey-ish kind of thing. We will get to that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, um, my children, I mean, school and activities, they don't understand that I have podcasts I need to record. So it'd be really great if they could just like handle homework and tests and get themselves to soccer and baseball games and practices on their own. But unfortunately, I think I'm legally bound to help them get
Yes,
there.
unfortunately.
Or I could probably be thrown into jail or be fined or something like that. So but there will be a Doctor Who episode out, sometime in the very near future. I'm actually very excited for that. I'm very excited to
Me too.
rewatch those
I'm
episodes and then to talk about Doctor Who, those episodes in particular, and the whole concept and series of Doctor Who. So that'll be really fun to do that with you. Um,
I'm very much looking forward to that. It's gonna be fun.
and I promise I'll give you a little bit more than 10 minutes, warning before I ask you to jump on for that one.
All right.
But until then, again, Melissa, thank you, and to everybody
You're
else out
welcome.
there, go watch the I Like Me documentary, and then go watch some John Candy movies because honestly, in the time we're living in now, it'd be nice to have somebody like John Candy around. And if we can't, at least we can still go back and watch his movies and smile and laugh. So go and do that. It'll make you feel better. Until then, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Who am I to be standing up here talking about John Candy? I'll tell you who I am. I'm one of the millions of people whose lives were touched and enriched by the life that was John Candy. I know you all have a story. You asked him for his autograph, and he stopped to ask you about you. You auditioned for Second City, and John watched you, smiling, laughing. And though you didn't get the job, you did get to walk away thinking, what do they know? John Candy thinks I'm funny. You walked behind John to communion. You carried his bags up to his hotel room, and he said, hey, that's too heavy. Let me get that for you. And then he tipped you. Or was that a day's pay? Your child was friends with John's daughter, Jennifer, or his son, Christopher, and you got a little stick of hearing how much more fun it was at the Candy House. You worked one of the 1,000 Air Canada flights John took between Toronto and LA, and you never had time fly by so fast. You worked at the butcher shop, the fish shop, the market, the LCBO, where John ordered up his feast for friends, and you took your time, not only to do it just right for him, but to keep John there for a moment longer. You caught a John Candy scene on TV one night, right when you needed to laugh more than anything in the world.
You delayed him at customs and immigration, just for fun. You worked on a John Candy show, and not only did he give you your very own Argo jacket on the last day, but he thanked you for your good work every day before that. He closed your bar, and it was packed because, of course, no one would leave until John Candy had gone home. Party monster? Maybe. Or maybe he knew you could just use the business.